Our next speaker is Nelson Switzer, and he joined Nestle Waters North America in 2016 as Vice President and Chief Sustainability Officer. And in this role, Nelson is responsible for continued growth and implementation of multifaceted sustainability strategies and programs. He reports to the company's Chief Executive Officer and is a member of the executive team. Nelson brings more than 20 years of experience working in public and private sectors at both local and international level, specializing in sustainable development and management. In his current position at Nestle Waters North America, Nelson focuses primarily on identifying issues and developing solutions to complex environmental, social, and governance challenges by facilitating constructive engagement and collaboration. And before joining Nestle Waters North America, Nelson was Director and Leader of Sustainable Business Solutions at PwC, where he designed and led a premium sustainability and stakeholder engagement management advisory practice. Nelson holds a Master of Engineering from University of Toronto and a Bachelor of Science from University of New Brunswick. Please welcome Nelson Switzer.
Hello. Congratulations to all of you who made it to this point in the day. I see actually with those lights I can barely see it, but it's glad to see that there are some brave souls here. I'm going to talk about a couple of items. Really, I've been with Nestle about, shy of 2 years, about 18, 19, 20 months. And I've learned a lot of very, very important lessons, but none more important on the packaging side of the work that we do than this. The bottle, this Deer Park bottle, indigenous to this part of the country, has unfortunately become a symbol of waste. A symbol of waste here in this region, but everywhere around the world. Just Friday, there was a report issued by Greenpeace and Break Free from Plastic that actually noted the prevalence of this bottle in our oceans, on our shorelines, and so on. But when I look at this bottle, and I will tell you, I lose sleep over that issue, I see something else. Clearly, I see the issue, but I also see the miracle of packaging and the necessity of packaging that we do have today and have for millennia. To cross an ocean requires that you put commodities, perishables, into a container so that you can consume it somewhere else. You cannot be in the middle of the ocean without a container, without a package. We could not and would not have been able to send someone to the moon without packaging. So I look at that miracle and I think about all that it has been able to do, allowing people to receive nourishment during times of crisis. And I wonder, how do we overcome the issue? The issue of the bottle, the commodity, which is PET, becoming waste instead of a valuable, reused resource, which is what it is. Now, I'm often faced with these three questions when it comes to the bottle. The first is marine debris, which I've mentioned. By 2040, their projections are that there will be 3 times as much plastic weight per ton in the oceans than actual biological material. But the fish, not all biological material, than fish. 3 times as much. That is a staggering number, and it's absolutely unacceptable. The second is the notion of unmanaged waste. And this is, as I imagine the people in this room know better than most, all of that material that falls out of the system. So it's not on a truck necessarily, it's not on its way to a regulated landfill, but it may in fact be at the side of the road and be what it's what enters the waste stream. It's what hits the shoreline, it's what hits the river and ends up in the ocean. The last question I get very often is the notion of biodegradability. Why don't you just put it in a biodegradable bottle? The simplicity of that. Right? Now, these are elegant questions, and it's an elegant, but unfortunately there is no elegant solution today. But it's still an important one, and we have to look at it. And that's what really brings us to this notion of the circular economy section. And as John alluded to earlier, or he said quite directly, the circular economy is not a new idea. When I was in school 25 years ago, we called it industrial ecology. Right? We just continue to rename these things, and that goes back to another very important point that was mentioned right away, right at the beginning. The ability to market these products and market the solution so that people understand it, they can digest it, they want to be a part of it, is another really, really important part of the game. So let me walk you through this notion of where we are right now. We are at a critical transition point. This transition point where we're moving from a truly linear economy where we take, we make, and we waste, to one where all products are consumed, recovered, and reused endlessly. Now here we can see, and this is the story of the PET bottle. Right now, about 78% of the material that goes out is lost. Whether it's to landfill, whether it's to an unmanaged stream, whether it's to a water body. Simply lost. That is lost commodity. Now, in North America, and by North America, I'm actually referring to Canada and the United States. I don't have the numbers for Mexico. But in Canada and the United States, the bottled beverage industry spends, I believe, about $8 billion a year on PET. $8 billion a year on PET. And they're allowing 78% of that $8 billion to simply go away. Instead of thinking about the notion of how do we recover that. Now, there's lots of challenges to it, and I'll get to those. But the other challenge is that with this linear economy model, we have a great degree of demand for natural resources. The energy that's required emits greenhouse gases, consumes water, and other resources. So where do we have to go? We have to make this transition to this circular economy model, or the closed loop model, if you will. Now, here you can see the loop is larger, and it is continuous, and it is a cycle. But something else that we recognized when we were doing a lot of work was, well, hold on a second, isn't this segment continuing to grow? Bottled water is the fastest growing segment in consumer goods. And if it's the fastest growing segment, no matter how much PET we can recover, we will always need new. We will always need more. And so we're trying to think about what is that sustainable solution? Where can we get more? Is the bio-based solution or other? In such a way that the resource demands are considerably lower. So here are some numbers, and I think that these are important to digest. The first is, as I mentioned a moment ago, 78% of the material is lost. So 22% of that material is recovered, of which only about 5% of it ends up as another bottle. It's a very small number to get back. We've got about 31% recycling rate here in the United States. There are 10 states that have bottle bills. They hover at about 55%. 40 states have nothing, and they hover at about 16% recovery. Terribly low. Embarrassing. When you think about what other developed countries are doing, these numbers are abysmal. In Europe, you're looking at the low 80s. In Canada, you're looking at the high 70s for recovery. And then less than 55% of households actually have access to a single stream system. Single stream is a very important piece. Now, I don't have enough time looking at this clock counting down to walk through all of those details, but I'll try to hit it in a moment. So, what I'd like to do is take a walk through the system. What we did was I challenged my team and our collective stakeholders to one question. What does the model of the future look like to enable closing the loop on the PET bottle? And this is what we came up with. And amazingly, it is today's system. And it goes back to the same thing we all know. The technologies already exist. The infrastructure is already understood. What we lack is the desire and the investment. The economic model needs to be reinvented. So I'm going to walk through each one of these, give a few snippets. I don't have enough time to give all the detail, but just a few snippets of what we have uncovered, what we've learned. The first is around collection. Now, I find this to be quite fascinating. A lot of data on here, of course. But look at that percentage of the population that actually has access. The percentage of the population with access, we're looking at about 95%, 94%, I think. However, the type of access that each has is quite unique. The type of access also has different types of encouragement and opportunity for people to recycle, different types of efficiency and effectiveness. And if you look on the right-hand side of this slide, you'll start to see what that breakdown looks like. Single stream, most common. But is it the most effective? Look at those collection containers. Bins, the original blue box. Carts on wheels that you can roll away. Bags, multiple collection systems, and so on. These numbers matter. They matter because each one of these decisions that were made by policymakers is a different lever that was pulled that convinces people, or in some cases, does the opposite. It discourages them from recycling. So when it comes to collection, what's ideal? Well, right now what we've seen is there is no quite ideal, but part of this was to try to figure out what does a model look like that has been and can be effective. And so we mapped 3 scenarios of various municipalities around Canada and the United States, and we found that there were 3 basic scenarios. Lots of in-betweeners. But A, B, and C, 15%, 45%, and 60%. Now clearly, if I'm in that municipality, if I'm an administrator, I'm looking for the highest number I can get back, knowing that I can recover the commodity, and I can recover this as a revenue stream rather than a cost. And you'll see this Venn diagram articulates what is necessary. The types of policies, the types of decisions, the types of tools that have helped enable it. When you look at City C versus City A, that's a distinct difference. Pay-as-you-throw program is in the City C. Universal automatic curbside collection. Away-from-home access. 50% of all material is consumed away from home. And yet away-from-home access is less than 16%. Processing. Now, when you think about what's available in the United States alone, there are 4 sizes of MRFs. Small, medium, medium-large, and large. Now, of the large facilities, they process about 55% of all recovered material. 20% of those are located directly adjacent to or within large municipalities. Now, what I should have done on here is I should have shown the actual absolute count of facilities. I think that would have been more helpful because it puts into context how much material is being processed per region and by size, because the small facilities process only 6%. And think about that, because that means the small facilities likely service small municipalities who actually seem to consume more of this material, but they have less access and a lower capacity to process. Now, end markets. This one is where, frankly, I find them most fascinating. So end markets refers to those places, those people, those entities who want to actually pull that commodity back. They want to buy it. It is a market. Currently, when it comes to PET, there are 2 markets for it. The top in orange represents the virgin market. This is new material. It's made of PTA and ethylene glycol. It's processed. That makes up about 95% of content of PET bottles in the United States. The second is mechanically recycled PET. Starts as a bottle, it's baled, it's crushed into flakes, and it's repelletized. That's about 5%. And we're talking about, I think it's important, actually I think I might talk about it on the next slide. Yes, I do. Of that material, what's fascinating about this count, especially when I look at the one on the right, is the food grade rPET. Right now, the capacity of the market to actually provide back enough rPET, mechanically recycled polyethylene terephthalate, is so small that it couldn't cover any of the major beverage manufacturers. It simply couldn't, because it's so small, because the quality that's required is so substantial, especially Nestle's quality standards, which are way above and beyond. You can't have certain levels of any chemical in there, but when you recycle material and the quality of the bales is low, it's very, very difficult to do that. So it's another challenge that has to be overcome. So how do you actually encourage people? How do you inspire people to want to take action and empower them so that they can take action? This was a really interesting finding by the Pew Research Institute, of which they found that when there was a strong policy in place, it was a good first step, but not enough. What in fact was required and what made it more effective was that there was active engagement and marketing and encouragement by the municipality or by the state or province that had a strong policy. So when you engage people, they felt included and wanted to participate. Now here's another interesting one. These are programs that are not necessarily municipalities or governments. As a matter of fact, these are both not-for-profits. On the right, you have the How to Recycle program. Nestle Waters, just 2 months ago, we announced that all of our major brands in the United States, all of our half-liter bottles, will have the How to Recycle logo on it, to encourage people to know how to recycle, what to do, where to take it, and so on. Very, very simple. Now, we have had the text on our label forever. Everybody, it's on all of the bottles. But the text is something that people don't read. You've got to make it easier for them. The one on the left, of course, is some work that's done by Keep America Beautiful, a fantastic organization that continues to empower groups across the United States, encouraging them to develop programs, whether it's through infrastructure or education. John mentioned Flint. During the Flint crisis, we partnered with Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Walmart, and others to create the Water Coalition, which made sure, and is still going on, to deliver clean, fresh water in bottles to the people of the city of Flint. We're still delivering, I think, about 35,000 bottles, or 35,000 cases a month, which is a tremendous amount. But now they've got all these bottles there. What are you going to do with them? So we then went back and we partnered with Keep America Beautiful and Keep Genesee County Beautiful to ensure that they could recover those bottles. While I had no intention of them going to GM, it looks like they're making great coats out of them, but nonetheless. And policy. Now, policy is an incredible tool, right? I heard somebody many years ago say, so I can't take credit for it, said policy is a tool for deciding who gets what. And that's precisely what's happening when it comes to policy in this space. And as you can see, there are these 5 principal tools. You can have a disposal ban. Well, that means you cannot throw it out. Mandatory recycling, a beverage container deposit, diversion goal, or even EPR for producers. Now, what's fascinating about this, we took a look at some of the larger municipalities and some outliers. And as you can see, no surprise in Canada, they're considerably higher. That has a lot to do with their extended producer responsibility work. Plus, it's I think, a socially committed culture, certainly on the West Coast. But then you take a look at some of the other areas. Look in Chicago, 11%. 11% recovery. Well, there's really nothing in Chicago, which actually always surprises me. Los Angeles, 76% recovery rate. And look why. They've got a mandate and a goal. They've got a container deposit and mandatory recycling. But the story never ends there, because it's not just one thing. I said earlier that I challenged the team to go and do some analysis and find out what are all of the levers that could be pulled and the effectors or the enablers of all of this work, of recovering more material. If you look at that trend line, the trend line is actually the recycling rate in each of these municipalities. And those stacked bars are the combination of all of the various factors. So whether there's a policy, do they include commercial recycling? What's the population dynamic and size? Do you need critical mass of a particular population? Do you need certain type of infrastructure? Is it a cart that's being used, or is it a bin? All of these pieces play in, and they're incredibly important to understand in order to make and develop and devise the right policy, the right framework, and the right combination to ensure that you can recover as much material as possible. Now, public-private funding is another important area. We certainly spend a lot of time there. The closed-loop fund, which I understand will be here to provide some remarks tomorrow, I believe. We are partners of the closed-loop fund, and it is a private equity fund that provides low to no interest loans to municipalities and private companies that are building infrastructure to encourage that we close the loop. A key enabler. We lack the sufficient infrastructure in the United States to close the loop and to actually truly build a circular economy. And so that's one of the things they're doing. The Recycling Partnership, which really is working to expand access to curbside recycling, another very important piece. And I mentioned Keep America Beautiful before. The models that they have developed over years at the very local level have been tremendously effective and should continue. Now, I love putting up numbers. This one always gets me. You know, when you think millions, it's already enough. Like, wow, millions. But we're talking billions. This work was done by ISWA a few years ago to make a determination of what is the value of the commodities that are actually being thrown away. $11.4 billion. That includes PET, polyethylene, polypropylene, paper, glass, and so on. But this is the estimated total value of commodities that are simply unrecovered, tossed. And there's some interesting work that Closed Loop Fund had done to actually calculate that it would actually cost us just under $10 billion to recover that material. So net, we are throwing away $1.4 billion. Anybody want a piece of that? Okay. So that's the stage that's been set. I see I've got a red light flashing here, which means get off. But if I could just have one more minute. When we look at those 6 elements, this is a series of solutions that we have devised or we are thinking at that most of them already exist. Expanding access to curbside collection, using rolling carts instead of bins. What is it that you can do around education and engagement? These are solutions, specific, tangible actions. But here is what I really want to get at when it comes to this slide. We cannot do any of this on our own. Collective action, that means we all identify that we have a common goal, common purpose, something that we all need to work towards together. We figure out what each one of those are, and we do it together, in partnership, in a collaborative, a coalition, if you will. That is the only way that we are going to truly close a loop, let alone on the bottle. But close the loop on our economy, create additional jobs, reduce the environmental degradation that is associated with this, the resource consumption. We abuse our resources, and we have an opportunity right now to restore them. So with that, I will say thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Nelson.
Thank you, sir.
Again, we've got time for some questions. Go to slido.com, enter event code #ISWA 2017. Oh, we got a couple.
They're on it. I like that first one. Can I take that first one?
Sure. Go right ahead.
So there's a question here that says, what innovations or startups working to close the loop are you most excited about? So while I can't mention some of them because they've asked us to sign NDAs, I'm going to talk about chemical recycling for a moment. Is anybody familiar with chemical recycling? It's this fantastic new process. It's actually an old technology, but it's a new process where they have actually found a way of recycling PET with no heat and no pressure. Purely chemical. It's absolutely stunning. I've seen it on a workbench where they take the PET, they toss it in, they stir it up, and they separate it, and they're able to yield ethylene glycol and PTA as raw materials. It's incredible. To me, that is one of the most spectacular innovations I've seen, and something I'm very excited about once they can get it. Another one that I was introduced to a couple of weeks ago, and it goes back to the biodegradability point, was somebody has actually developed this really interesting technology where they insert an active polymer agent, or I should say depolymerization agent, into the bottle during pelletization. During formation. So that's what, when you take the pellets and you heat it and you shape it. And this agent, it degrades, no, it does not degrade. It transforms the bottle into wax, inert wax, within 12 years. Now, I know that might sound unusual or perhaps not too exciting, but a current bottle takes about 800 to 1,500 years to degrade in its entirety and become inert. Now we're talking about a bottle that can degrade in 12 years. And doesn't degrade, it transforms into inert wax. To me, that was quite fascinating. And one of the questions I asked when they presented this was, what's that going to do to the recycling stream? Because I'm always wondering, will this contaminate the waste stream?
Yep.
And in fact, it doesn't. Because once you reheat that plastic, or you depolymerize it chemically, it renders this material that they add inert. So it's really quite fascinating. Those are just a couple that I'm pretty excited about. There's a whole bunch of others that on the industrial scale as well, from processing and collection. But we can move to another question.
Okay. A couple more questions up there. What lessons has Nestle Water North America learned from past efforts in closing the loop?
So many. I think the biggest one would be in 2008, I believe. Nestle Waters announced that we were going to move the national PET recycling rate from 31% of where it was, and still is, to 60%. We made that commitment. And the lesson that was learned there is don't make a commitment that you cannot achieve. Don't make a commitment that you have not consulted others on. Because the way that Nestle Waters wanted to do that was by championing EPR legislation and policy. Get out there, get every government to adopt EPR, extended producer responsibility. Well, that's going to solve it for us because we're going to need to collect that material. Well, nobody seemed to have the appetite for EPR at the government level or even our colleagues in other companies. So without that, it really didn't go anywhere, which is a real shame. We made that commitment, and it's something that I have to talk about pretty often because I get phone calls from activists saying, hey, what's going on with your 2018 goal to go to 60%? And I have to, very honestly say we weren't able to do it, not that way.
Okay. We've got a couple more, Nelson.
Yeah.
The bottom one. Recently, a company announced about recyclable ketchup packets. Is that a practical solution, and what's Nestle's take on that?
So I don't know about this one. A company announced recyclable ketchup sachets. Is that a practical solution? I don't know. I don't use ketchup. I don't know. It's not really a product I think that we deal with. Now let me break the question into another piece though, and I'm not trying to avoid the question. Sachets is a huge issue. It's one of the most prevalent waste products, especially when you think about countries like Indonesia and the AOA region, or the Asia-Oceania region. And the fact that they are not recyclable or not readily recyclable is a significant issue. And I think if we can develop or redesign that package, design for recyclability, I think it's certainly a step in a more logical direction. That would be the short answer.
How about the middle one? Nestle's is a large producer of products with wrappers, so it's other divisions in your company, not the water division. Wrappers ending up in the environment. Collection of them is not practical. Is Nestle doing things to make these biodegradable?
So to make them biodegradable. So we actually do have I wouldn't say a position on biodegradability, but we've had a very long discussion about biodegradability. The challenge with it is that we also have a greenhouse gas target. When you have packaging that's biodegradable, it biodegrades and it emits carbon dioxide. And so there's this internal dialogue between those who want to see the packaging become biodegradable and those who want to keep the greenhouse gases down. So we have an internal conflict, as it were, on that. Now, that said, we do have a variety of what are called PTCs. I think it's Product Technology Centers around the world, one in Ohio, one in France that I deal with mostly, and they work on these questions specifically to try to figure out, is biodegradability most effective? So where Nestle stands on this and any issue is on the principle of creating shared value, which you may or may not know about. But essentially, our objective is that everything has a net positive contribution. So that means that we are always creating value. Now, the challenge is the net part. When you have greenhouse gases that are up here in terms of, well, let's say down here from a negative perspective, but your water practices are up here, your net value might actually be neutral, which is a good thing. However, you still have to look at the economic and the social implications of those decisions. And that's a tough one for any organization, certainly one that's as diversified and as large and as varied products. But that is the way we look at it, which is what is the net value that we are creating here, environmentally, socially, and economically.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Nelson, we've got time for one more.
Sure.
I'll let you choose 1, 2, or 3, and I'll read it off for the audience. Which
you want
one
me
would
to,
you like? You choose. There's 3 up there.
Sure. I can take any 3 of them. I feel terrible for only picking one. So let me choose, what role will bio-based plastics play in your packaging in the future? What advantages do you expect to see from such a move? Actually, maybe I shouldn't ask that one because it'll get me in trouble with my colleagues, but I'll do it anyways. So we have invested in a company called Origin Plastics. They are setting up shop right now. They have developed a bio-based PET. It's partially bio-based. I believe it's the E that they have found they've developed. And our plan is within a few years, we're actually going to move this to commercialization. So we will have a bio bottle, a bio PET bottle that we will release. I believe 2020 is our goal. Now, there are some challenges with it that I see. First of all, it means that we're still going and we're using material, right? Instead of, and I'm concerned that, is it going to distract us from the need to go and recover more material? My colleagues have said no, because we'll never have that much bio-PET available in order to replace that hole. But does it form part of the suite of solutions? Absolutely. Like any smart, if you think about the McKinsey curve for greenhouse gases, it's the same thing. We're going to need a suite of solutions. rPET, chemical PET, innovations beyond PET, bio-PET, and so on, if we are truly going to close a loop on the bottle itself.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything else?
I think we're going to wrap it up.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much, Nelson.
Thank you, sir.
Great presentation. Thank you.